Cool. Great. So welcome, everyone. I'm going to apologize up front. I haven't been able to make it down to my office in the basement since I had my accident on Memorial Day. So I'm kind of in the middle of our house. So if you hear a dog bark, I apologize up front. I'm Cindy Olson, founder of ESA. Both John and Anna join me in welcoming you guys today. This is a unique roundtable in that Christian Gomez is joining us again to help us operationalize the concepts that Marcus Buckingham shares. And everyone loves Marcus, right? And we had Marcus in April and May, and Christian and I decided that it would make sense to invite the same people that registered or attended those events, and he would share practical ways to help make the concepts Marcus talks about happen in your own organization. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. We obviously, you saw, we're recording it, and we'll send the link of the recording to everyone that registered or attended in the follow-up email. And then please feel free to ask questions at any time by putting them in chat, and Christian and I will monitor the chat and make sure that they're answered. And we'll have time at the end to answer questions as well. So I just wanted to share a little bit about ESA. For the past years, we've partnered with ADP to build the ESA community of over 1,200 participants in around 20 cities. And we've delivered world-class thought leadership and technologies that operationalize shaping the future of work. ESA is unique in that we're really the only one that brings CHROs, CIOs, and other work tech executives together, because we have a fundamental belief that they all have to be in lockstep with each other to deliver the kind of worker experience necessary to attract and retain talent, especially now. So today I am honored and thankful that he's here to welcome back Christian Gomez, who works side by side with Marcus Buckingham, helping organizations create cultures where the employee is valued. Christian is the Vice President of Strategy at the Marcus Buckingham Company and a part of ADP, and he is a true leader himself. And we're also honored to have two rock star executives joining Christian today, who will share the kind of things they are doing to operationalize what Marcus talks about in their organizations. Dave Williams, who has been with us many times, is the SVP of Global IT Operations and the Employee Experience for Mastercard. He has been living the concepts Marcus talks about for many years, and he's an unbelievable leader, not only at Mastercard, but in the community, and a mentor to new IT leaders. And by the way, Dave, I want Dave to share his story about receiving Marcus's book, Break All the Rules, years ago, because it's a very interesting story. And we also welcome Tim Juergensen, who also has been with us a couple of times. He's the Senior Vice President and Chief Experience Officer at Covenant Health, and I love his title, Chief Experience Officer. Tim has also led for many years using the concepts of Marcus Buckingham, is a truly beloved leader within Covenant Health, and I've seen examples of that from his people as well as the community. And this is going to be, I think, a truly special roundtable discussion with some of the best leaders in the country, led by one of the best leaders in the country, Christian. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to him. Christian, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Cindy. And thank you all for joining. As I was kind of preparing for this session, I was kind of getting these warm feelings, just remembering the prior sessions that we had, and the fact that we obviously do these type of events and these types of thought leadership a lot. We all do. Everybody on the phone, we as attendees, sometimes myself as a moderator, as a speaker. But I think what makes this one a little bit different is that when we began, including Marcus, when he jumped on the very first one, we did it because we had a little bit of a sense of duty, a sense of service, and we wanted to have a conversation around the topics that he touched on in that book that he released, Love and Work, which I'll be honest with you, surprised everyone, including us, in terms of the amount of, it wasn't just a positive reception, the fact that it was on the New York Times bestselling, he's done that before, but it was the emotive response across the board from leaders like yourselves and from people that are just showing up to work and trying to do the very best that they can for themselves and the people that they serve. So when I look at what we're doing here, this is, I believe, our third intensive touch point, and the fact that you're here and the fact that you want to continue to have this conversation and you're so committed to making sure that we don't just learn something, but we understand how does it apply to ourselves and how do we turn it into tangible value. So I just wanted to say that up front. I'm really excited and grateful to be able to continue this conversation with all of you. And what I thought we would do today, I think I mentioned this to you guys in the past. I used to do a lot of keynote speaking. It was something that I really enjoyed doing. And then the pandemic hit and that kind of came to a halt. And we were asked to go and do this in a virtual manner. And I remember very early on having a conversation with Cindy, telling her, I'm retiring. I'm not doing this. I can't do this in a virtual setting. It just doesn't feel right. It's going to feel fake. So we together came up with a format that we thought was really helpful. And in honor of Marcus Buckingham, we followed his methodology. Let's reverse engineer it. Let's go and talk to people like yourselves and ask you, given the fact that you're probably busier now during the pandemic working virtually than you were before, because now you're stuck and you're a captive audience and everybody can reach you, what would make this worth your while? And we always said, and what we always heard was, number one, tell me something that's relevant and new that could help me. But then the second part was, I want to hear from leaders like myself. I feel like I'm a little bit isolated right now, and I don't have the same opportunity to hear from other people that are trying to do the very same things that I am. That would be incredibly valuable. So we went back and reverse engineered a format that we felt would give that to you in a way that felt like I'm not sitting in an hour staring at a screen. So that's what we're going to do today. With our amazing panel, I'm going to touch on a couple of the key themes that kind of anchor this entire value proposition of love and work, and what that means for us as we're trying to establish and create an environment where people feel like they can bring the best of themselves to work. I'm also going to be citing some things from the ADP Research Institute. So as you guys probably know by now, Marcus is an author and he creates incredible content that's very helpful to all of us. But his day job, ironically enough, is that he's a researcher and he leads the people in performance practice at the ADP Research Institute, which is beautiful because it's the world's biggest laboratory. They have more data points on people at work than any lab in the world. And what they do, and what that means for us, all of us that are trying to do the right thing and lead teams and craft really amazing organizations, is that we get a bunch of really cool studies based off of real data with real people doing real work in the real world that can inform either our assumptions or our existing beliefs. So I'll make sure that whatever we talk about today, whatever I say, is anchored in some of those research. And then I want to make sure that you guys have access to that research yourselves so that you guys can peruse it and go in and look at the things that are most interesting to you. So I thought I'd kick it off with a topic that I think is very personal. And I think it ties in perfectly with what Marcus talked about the first time he came out. And that was about ourselves. As we know, we hear it ad nauseum, especially those of you in your positions. Keeping people in their spots is harder than it's ever been. Retention turnover is at an unprecedented rate. The labor force is shrinking, which is exacerbating the problem because now it's harder for us to replace people that do leave, the amazing people that we leave, which unfortunately seems to be the ones that we end up losing because everybody else wants. So Marcus did a study not too long ago that was focused on what we would call, what he would call actually, the ability for somebody to, how do we create a reliable measurement that tells us how important is it for an individual to be seen, heard, and valued? What does it mean for an individual to show up to work and feel like they're not just another number, they're not file number 14567, right? And he created a measurement instrument that allows us to do that. And in the context of releasing that measurement instrument to the world, he talked about what he found and what he saw. And the number one thing that we hear is that every single employee, including ourselves, it doesn't matter what position you're in within the hierarchy, when we show up to work, it's not usually about just collecting a paycheck. Even if some of us actually tell ourselves that to get through some of the days, the reality is that we bring ourselves, we bring our pride. When we come back home and we see our families, when we're at the weekend at a barbecue, what we do for a living means something, and it is a sense of pride and inspiration. So it's important for the individual to feel some sense of a personal connection to what they do. So what do we do as leaders and people that craft strategy for organizations to be able to enable that? So what I figured I would do today is that, number one, I tell you guys at a very high level something that we've tried to do to help leaders at large do that. And then I'm going to tee up our panel so that they can tell us a little bit about what does that mean for them and how are they seeing that in practice. So what have we done? This came up a lot in the chat in the last two sessions because a lot of you I take are very familiar with it, and you could probably see it behind me. And that is the standout assessment. Marcus Buckingham back in the 90s, it sounds crazy that it was that long ago, with Gallup created an assessment called Strengths Finders. And that assessment was designed to give people a language to articulate the activities that make them feel strong. What do I feel like when I'm at my best? What do those activities look like? Over a decade later, he created a follow-up assessment when he started his own company called Standout. That assessment was designed not to help, not so much to create a language, but to actually introduce some sort of a proactive coaching mechanism that helped us understand not necessarily who we are, but what do I look like when I show up at my best? And that was a situational judgment test. So what we do and what we've tried to do empowering organizations is to be able to allow us to ask every individual to take this short situational judgment test that tells them, when you're operating at your best, what do you look like to others around you? What does it look like for you to be in flow, which is a really cool term that we hear a lot of people use. So then what that means is that when you show up to an organization or you show up to a team, in our instances, we help you understand and others understand about you, what is it that this person brings and how do we help them contribute it? That's a very, it's not a dry, but it's a very specific example. And I've had the pleasure of speaking with both of our panelists, and they have some amazing anecdotes about what they've done or leaders around them have done in their organizations to create some of that sense, the same feeling. So I'll start by teeing up Tim. If you can tell us a little bit about what have you guys done in the context of your strategy or the programs that you rolled out to help people, whether it's somebody net new in the door or somebody that's been with your organization for a while, how do we help them express the best of themselves at work and create that connection, personal connection to what they do and who they do it for?
Thanks, Christian. And again, I'm honored to be a part of this panel, and I plan on learning as much as I can from everybody else speaking as well today, but happy to share. I think that we've found that our secret sauce in terms of helping our employees all feel this intrinsic sense of belonging as they walk into the door, that, as you said, Christian, being seen, heard, and valued, is the key to that is the relationship they have with their leader. And back in late 2020, our turnover was just, as you can just imagine, with COVID, just all over the place. And by the way, I'm part of a larger acute care healthcare system. We're in 7 states, and we also have a post-acute care number of post-acute care facilities. But keeping staff on board in a very difficult time was a real challenge. And but we recognized right away that finding a way to connect leaders with their team members was really important. And the way we did that was being very structured and intentional with a sense of accountability of implementing stay interviews. That is, a new employee walking in the door had a conversation with their leader at 30 days, at 90 days, at 6 months, and at the end of 1 year. And in existing employees, we asked for those stay interviews to happen a couple of times a year. And one of the questions that that leader asks is, what do you love about your job? And we added with Marcus, and by the way, you were when I was the last time we were together, one of the things I took away from that was we added not only what do you love about your job, but do you get a chance to do it every day? And even adding that question, I think has given us a lot more rich data. But what it's allowed is, it was amazing when we implemented that, and we've done that. Actually, I have to report back to our board the completion percentage on a monthly basis that we have of our stay interviews, and our board is set 95% as the target. So we're actually we've created accountability around doing those stay interviews. Make a fun, exciting story shorter or less long. In all of our competitors at the end of 2021, their turnover remained just getting worse and worse and worse. In 2021, we cut turnover by almost 10%. And we were actually able to put a financial number on that. We know what 1% costs by role, but altogether we saved close to $6 million in hiring costs with those stay interviews. It's that alone, and there's some other things that we've done that probably won't have time to talk all about, but it's made a special connection, and we do it across the system. We're in 7 states, and the word stay interview, everybody knows what that means. Everybody understands as a leader that that's what they're expected to do as a leader. But we've got data that shows it's had an impact on our organization.
I love that. I love what you just did there, because there's a couple of things you did that caught my attention. Number one, you're not shy about using the word love, right? And I know that we've been talking about the word love a lot in this context because of the title of the book, but it's just putting that human quality back into humans at work. That's super important. And then the second thing that you did is that in our profession, and I know we have some really good diversity of the types of leaders that we have on the line, but those that are really in the people discipline itself, HR, if you will, we have been challenged at times to be able to articulate that ROI. What is it that I'm doing? If I step outside of the conversation of compliance, then why am I doing that? What's the ROI behind that? Being able to articulate the fact that we did something to elevate our people at work that might deviate a little bit from the bottom line. Obviously, you're in healthcare, so the bottom line is the health of people itself. So it's not easier, but it's a more natural connection. But being able to articulate that in a very intentional way is going to allow us to be able to go out there and do some things that are going to be really meaningful. Before I tee up Dave, I just wanted to also, and because of the nature of the way that we're doing this, we want this to feel like a conversation. We're all friends. We're sitting around the table having a conversation. So please, in the chat, put questions, put observations that you might be hearing. I will touch on them. I'll make sure that before we move on to the next topic, we address them as best as I can. And I was also going to do it because I mentioned it earlier. I was not that great at multitasking. I'm going to put in the chat a link to the assessment that I was just mentioning, because what we did maybe 2 months ago is that we made it just free for everyone. We wanted to kind of like walk in our own footsteps and say, look, this is not about monetizing something. This is about helping individuals and people bring the very best of themselves at work. So I welcome all of you to go and take that assessment or share it with anybody in your organizations or friends and family. But with that being said, Dave, obviously I feel like we go way back, but you have some amazing observations in terms of some of the things that you've seen that you do and some of the things that you sponsor within your organization. Picking up on some of the things that Timothy shared, what are you guys doing over there?
Yeah, I truly appreciate you including me and Cindy talking me into it. And she's always saying, Dave, you do this every day. She's always very, always giving me kudos. But she's one of the best outside mentors I've had in a long time. So, Tim, great feedback, because we do similar things as well. I will say I'm the oddball at the table. I'm the one that comes from 20 years of operations and 7 years of IT. Which wasn't my choice. I started off early on at Sprint in the executive program and was put into operations, and I started the fish philosophy, and I was told several times I was going to end up getting fired for the things I'm doing to change the culture. But I work in a 24/7 environment where the stress is high. And I learned early on from, excellent mentors saying, hey, you don't save lives, but you got a highly stressful job and you got to take care of your people. You got to care about them, and you're the example, and it starts from the top and works its way down. And so I learned that at an early age, and I've just, good Lord has blessed me year after year, helped me realize that being a leader is a true blessing. My second job was with an energy company, and I was receiving my second president award for leadership and transforming culture. And the first thing they said to me is, hey, Dave Williams is one of those that first breaks all the rules. And I got up on stage and I said, I want you to know, I'm in front of the board and the CEO, and I'm truly offended by what you just said, because I don't break the rules. And they go, no, you need to read this book by Marcus Buckingham, because this book was written for you and it's how you lead today. And when I was reading Love Plus Work, I didn't forget about the book. I didn't realize it was Marcus, because I don't remember all the authors of every book I read. And I just started laughing because I went back to exactly that moment in all the books that I referred to all the mentees and the leaders on my team throughout Mastercard and Landis & Gear, that I gave that book to, saying, read this book. It's critical, and it's how we should run our cultures going forward. And so 7 years ago, I was contacted by our president of IT and said, hey, I need you to take over IT. And I said, absolutely not, but thanks for asking. And he goes, well, Dave, I don't think you realize now it's your job and you don't have a choice. So now you're responsible for IT. I said, why me? And he said, Dave, you truly transformed operations at Mastercard to a loving, caring environment. You have calmed CEOs from around this world because of the way you lead, and you have made your employee experience scores are out of this world. And so I need you to transform IT from being a number to being a true culture of people that are valued. And so we started doing that. And you know, I weeded people out that, you know, and I told them, I said, we need to treat this like we treat customers. You know, without the employee, we don't have a job. And so it was really bringing in the right leadership team to, you know, tell them that, you know, hey, it starts from the top. And the way I lead is I care more about my people than I do anybody else. And the people that we serve deserve the best support and services in the world. And our job is to give them that. And, you know, I will tell you through the pandemic and what I learned more, you know, because I always had daily check-ins, you know, and one-on-ones and all that Marcus, you know, talks about. But it's really about, I was on a podcast with Lisa Nichols, all about, you know, mentorships and leadership, and really told her, I said, you know, I've always had compassion or passion for the job, but I learned how to have compassion through the pandemic because I had to check in often around the world to every part of my team to understand what was going on in their life. How could I help them? You know, how could I make their job better? What was going on in the family environment? What was going on that we could help? You know, and so that we could rally the team across the world, especially if somebody had COVID or somebody, they just lost a family member to COVID. So I really learned compassion and how to deal with that and how to make them feel like, you know what, that's more important than the work that we're doing. And then we started virtual water coolers, you know, saying, hey, every couple of weeks we do a virtual water cooler with all my staff, and it's, you can't talk about work. You come in for 30 minutes. What do you love about, you know, work, but you can't talk about it? Let's talk about what you're doing, you know, vacation coming up, you know, what kind of animals do you have? Trying to get that stress out of there and getting to know each other even better. And then it's also, you know, we have an employee experience surveys that tell us, you know, I know Marcus, you know, be careful with those surveys. And I truly agree with that. But we do the employee experience survey to understand how my team's doing and my leadership team, so that I have that feedback so that we can improve and know, hey, how are we doing? Because my team better be doing one-on-ones. They better be doing all hands. They better be doing skip levels, and they have to care about the people. And I have to know people that are getting into leadership or new roles, what can we do better? And you've got to partner with HR to help you do that as well, and corporate security. So I ramble too much, I apologize. But I can tell you, it's a blessing to be a leader. And Marcus's book is a blessing. And it's really hard when you look at the brand that I work for. I love the company I work for, but you've really got to move mountains to try to do some of the things. But you know, it's like they said, I was recently nominated for the Orby. My president actually put in my letter to the Orby Awards that we are trying to model the kind of leadership that Dave displays and demonstrates on a daily basis. And to me, that hit home and what I'm here to do. And a lot of that's because of, you know, books like, you know, Marcus that he's published. So.
I appreciate that, Dave. That's, I mean, first of all, appreciate your openness to share the experience of us. One of the things that catches me is that I'm transparent. I have 4 themes that I want to touch on today. And in the first question, we touched on all 4. They're all incredibly interrelated. And one of the things I always say about the work Marcus has done, he's a very intelligent guy, right? But he hasn't made any of that up. What makes it so resounding is that he observes it. He might not have observed you specifically, Dave, but he's observed people like you in action. And then he draws those insights, connects the dots, and then puts them in a way that we can understand it. Just a really quick follow-up to your question, Dave. Cindy's asking can you share a little bit about what have you seen between your IT organization and maybe other parts of the organization and the impact that some of these strategies have had on turnover specifically?
Yeah, I'll tell you, my churn rate right now is 7% across the globe for a few hundred people. And when people ask, why is that? And they said, well, because Dave cares. We have a leader that it does start at the top, and something's going on, he will actually call and say, how can I help you? How can I pray for you? A lot of times you're not supposed to do that, but I do it anyways because I'm bold. I'm pretty transparent too with them. One of the other things too is I wasn't happy with onboarding, what was going on. You look at our brand and our motto is to be priceless experience. And, I thought that's what onboarding should be. And about 2 years ago, I went to our CHRO and I said, hey, I don't want to be meddling in your business or upset you, but I'm not happy with onboarding and I really need to partner with you and I need your blessing to, represent me and be the senior exec to sponsor me. But I really want to work with all the key stakeholders across the company and fix this because I feel it could be a better experience. And so we've done that for the last 2 years. And now I would say, unfortunately, but fortunately, I am always on the hook for onboarding now. And HR comes after me and they say, Dave, we need your help. And we partner very close now. And we just created a digital onboarding tool that we're working with an outside provider to help provide a better experience. We took it from 14 days down to 3 days to onboard somebody. And we're just consistently always looking at how can we do better, and how can we improve that? Because that's the most important thing when you bring somebody in is to protect your brand and for them to have a great onboarding experience. So hopefully that helps answer your question.
Absolutely. And it's a key topic you just mentioned, because as I said earlier, the key for us as we're trying to drive some of these initiatives, you talked about how hard it is sometimes within a corporate structure to be able to drive some of the things that we know are the right things to do, is to be able to have data that can support us. So you just brought up the topic of onboarding. And one of the things that we've seen, Marcus did a study right as we were emerging from the pandemic around just trying to understand what does it feel like to be a worker right now and what are the different things that influence them so that we have a little bit of signal. Where should we be focusing? And I'll be honest with you, we were very surprised by the findings. This was a very robust, worldwide ranging study. And the one thing that jumped off the page in the data was the fact that one of the biggest drivers in engagement, which was tied to subsequent retention, was whether or not the respondents self-identified as being part of a team. They were actually 2.5 times more likely to have full engagement, meaning I am all in, I am here, committed, if they raised their hand and said, I feel like I'm on a team. And that included contract employees, maybe some of these virtual employees that you would never associate with being on a team. Going back to your world, Tim, maybe doctors. Doctors, you don't necessarily associate them with feeling like, oh, I work in a team. But if a doctor came back and said, actually, I feel like I'm on a team, regardless of what the org chart says, I feel like I work on a team, that had a material impact on whether or not that person was subsequently engaged and then eventually would stay with the organization, leave, or what they did. So what do? I want to keep the common thread. So we have the standout assessment that I just mentioned. One of the things that we try to help organizations do with that assessment is that as soon as somebody joins an organization, and I'll use our parent company, ADP, as a great example, immediately after that person walks in the door, their team leader has their standout roles in front of them. So I have Dave joining my organization. I immediately have a way to communicate with him and say, this is what it says that you look like when you're at your best. Tell me about that. Does that resonate with you? Give me some examples, Tim, some of the questions that you're asking. When was the last time a day flew by? What is it that really drives you in the context of the role that you're going to start? And then all of a sudden you start to create that environment where everybody on a team knows you and sees you for the best of what you bring. So that's just something that feels like, oh my God, that's impossible. It's actually not. It's actually a pretty practical way for us to be able to start to create that sense of familiarity on day one and have you and make you feel like you belong to a team that sees you for what you bring. You shared with us a little bit, Dave, on onboarding. I'll turn it over to Tim. What do you do? What does your system do to help people especially in your environment, in the healthcare environment, where it might not always be as apparent through the course of the work that your caregivers provide. How do you make them feel like they're a part of the team? And how do you introduce that either in the onboarding process or anywhere else in the employee life cycle?
Well, I'll try and be as concise as I can, but I think that that onboarding experience, even as a candidate, is really important. And we define our onboarding experience actually beginning when that offer is signed. So one of the things that we expect is the manager of those of a team member that has signed an offer is to immediately reach out to that and begin building the relationship before day one on the job. And then when they actually get on the job on day one, aside from making sure that they have everything they need on day one to do their job, we want to make sure that they understand that one of the expectations is we hope they're going to hang around for at least a year, and we present to them their training curriculum for that whole year. We have a whole center of excellence. We have our Covenant Academy, it's called, and when you walk in the door, you're now a student, and you learn on day one what your transcript's going to look like, and who your coaches are, who's going to be training you, and that goes across the board for clinical and non-clinical. From a clinical perspective, one of the things that one of our most vulnerable employee populations is nursing. And one of the things that we identified early on that we're getting more and more first-year nursing students. We're hiring those folks on we found that, again, as you talked about, that talent pool has shrunk dramatically. Anybody that's in healthcare, I mean, I don't count sheep at night. I count nurses. But our capacity to take on new grads, that takes time. That takes preceptorship, and so we've put in place a nurse residency program for our new nurses, we've just implemented that. We just started with 3 cohorts, and the immediate response has been just tremendous. People feel that they're taken care of, and because they have a preceptor, and it's taken an investment for us to do this, but it's going to pay off. Right now, we're still at 100% retention of that cohort, and we have 3 additional cohorts yet this fall that we're going to bring on as well. So those are some, again, I think that we need intentional strategies with accountability and structure for these types of things. And our key metric in terms of engagement is retention. I mean, there are other metrics, but that's the main one we keep our eye on. So those are a couple of the things that again, we've made an investment getting it.
It's interesting you mentioned the role of a nurse. I work closely with healthcare, so I understand the importance of that function. And any of us who've ever been to a hospital, had a family member in a hospital, understands the incredible value and importance of that role itself and what it does for the experience of somebody that is seeking medical attention. And one of the things that comes up whenever you talk about that function, but it impacts all of us and all of our organizations, regardless of what industry we're in, is the concept of span of control. How do we make sure that we do have people that feel seen, heard, and valued in the context of our organization, given the fact that maybe our leaders don't have enough time or the nature of the way that the work is performed? And in the chat, somebody mentioned what Marcus talks about in terms of attention. Don't talk about span of control, talk about span of attention. Us as human beings derive energy from the attention of others. And not all attention is created equal. In a couple of different ways. Negative attention has a disproportionate impact than positive attention. And it has a completely different impact if you give me negative attention as opposed to whether you give me positive attention. And then not everybody's attention is the same. In the context of work, getting attention from our leader means more than any other attention we're going to receive. We want to know what our leaders understand about the work that we do, how we're doing it, how we feel, and just simply knowing that they're there is incredibly important. One of the things that we've done, and it's no secret, is we've leveraged the ability to use technology. Going back earlier to Rick's question and Dave's response, we have technology now, right? With the pandemic, we realized we have to deploy all these tools to keep people connected, the ability for us to be able to connect the way we're connecting now. So what we've done is we've started to reverse engineer what we believe the most effective conversations look like, and then deploy them across all of those different types of tools that you just mentioned. And the ability for us is just to have a team leader consciously, and Tim, to your point, in a methodical process, know and ask and solicit, how are you feeling? What's most important right now, and how can I help you? Our ability to do that at scale has shown us that there is an exponential uplift in what happens with that individual if you do that. And it's one of the few instances in leadership or in anything that I've seen where quantity trumps quality. So if you have the ability for a leader to check in with somebody, we're calling it a check-in, but it's basically, where are you at? What's most important? How can I help you? The more frequently that happens has way more of an impact than the quality of how you do it. So if Dave has a phenomenal conversation with me once a month, it's nowhere near as effective if Tim has a very focused conversation with me once a week. And there's some instances where that feels really difficult. Nurses, I mean, the span of control for nurses is an average, what, 1 to 40, 1 to 60? It's untenable. So if you switch the focus on span of control to span of attention, just put your hand on the shoulder and say, are you okay?
That was when Anne Marie said something.
I'm sorry, I heard a voice. I think somebody's off mute, so I don't think that was a question. But I'll give you an example, Tim. I just saw it. I heard it from a chief nursing officer from a very large health system. A nurse being able to say, having the ability for somebody to prompt me so that I can tell them, look, I just lost a patient in room 405 and it hurt. It happens all the time, but just somebody asked me, somebody put their hand on my shoulder and I said it. And that gave me a little bit more energy and a little bit more solace to be able to continue about my work. So as it relates to that, again, tying in the questions that we have in the chat, there was a couple also around the stay interviews. If you're doing other type of programs in place, that you still need a stay interview. And the answer is, it depends. It varies based on your organization. I am always going to go with the recommendation of do it in the flow of work. Make sure you're not interrupting the work. Make sure it makes sense. If you have a quarterly conversation that's focused on the individual, you might not need a stay interview, because what you're doing is delivering that attention and you're extracting the insight about the individual to help us set up their work, the world of work in a more effective way. But the main thing is try different things and make sure that you do it in the context of what the work looks like. You talked about the stay interview, Tim. Dave, tell us a little bit about what are you guys doing, especially in your world, from an IT perspective, to enable technology to make sure that people are closer to each other, to make sure that we're establishing connection. What are the types of things that you're seeing or that you're doing effectively in that realm?
I would say, obviously the collaboration tools are key. Being on video, trying to, encourage people to, because we do have the hybrid flex work right now. It was be in the office 2 times a week. Now it's kind of dependent on the EVP, and if you want your employees to come in. My employees are global, and most of my employees got to come in because they support IT. There are some that I let rotate around, but definitely have to have, the collaboration tools like Teams. We rely a lot on Teams. We have Slack coming into the environment because the developers want to use that. So we got to be mindful of that. We used to use Skype and we removed that. We also have, I use AI machine learning a lot now. I've implemented my AI into machine learning into Teams. That's been really great, because what we've tried to do in the last year or two is really shift left and shift out and really make an IT where really trying to encourage people not to call, use the self-serve options as well as the chat bots and the machine learning to be able to tell what the consumers need and what they're looking for. So we've implemented that, and we're now outpacing the calls to the help desk, and chat and live chat are being in the bot are being used more than the phone calls, which has been incredible. Some don't like the self-serve because they're like, hey, I don't want to self-serve myself. I'd rather just call somebody. That's more convenient. But we try to just educate, hey, we've done some simple studies, worked with Gardner, and Forrester and some of them. And we do know people are always going to call a desk. We always tell them, hey, we're just a phone call away. Because we don't want to say, hey, we're never going to be here for you, because that's not the case. And you spoke recently, one of your things you were speaking about earlier, and about the culture and how we change things. I will tell you, Ajay, who was our previous CEO, since the day I started at Mastercard, it was all about the decency quotient, the DQ. You'll hear him on any podcast or news or whatever he talks. He recently left the company, and Michael follows the same suit. But we were all taught, it's all about decency, and it's all about you treat people the way you want to be treated, and every voice matters. And I think that's what's key. It goes back to how do we ensure people are being heard? Well, you include them. I can tell you when it comes to strategy, I don't include just my management team and I do what the CEO tells me to do. I'm going to break the rules, and I'm actually going to bring all my staff in, and we're going to develop the 2 to 3 year roadmap and strategy together, because you know what? They're the ones that actually implement it and do the work. So why wouldn't I include them? And so that's why I believe I've been successful for the 20-something years I've done, because that's the way I learned how to do it. And I've always engaged them, and they're so appreciative, because they're like, even I did one in April, and I brought several people from around the world to be part of that, even at the front lines. And they're like, why would you do that? Nobody's ever done that. And I said, because you do most of the work, and you have better ideas than even I do. I don't have all the answers. The team has the answers, and it's all about collaboration. And everybody has a voice, and they all have to be heard. So
it's funny. You say that. Marcus has a term he uses. It's we are obviously the most successful species on the planet in being able to craft the world, nature to our benefit. And one of the tools we've developed, if not the tool, he calls it the apex tool, that we've developed to help us be able to accomplish everything that we have as a species, is the team. We operate as a team. We're not the only species that operates as a team, but if you and I were to do anything on this planet individually, we would be exponentially less effective than if we were able to come together with others to be able to achieve it. So when I look at, there's another comment here that I have to stop and talk and address. Rob talked about the nurse environment, which again is a phenomenal environment, because not a phenomenal, but it's a great example for us. And his point is the fact that only 15% of their support comes from leaders. The rest comes from the rest of us. We have the privilege of not just working closely with health organizations, but in the nature of the work that we do, being able to understand them and understand what that work looks like. So one of the things that we do through our technology is similar to what you mentioned, Dave, is that we'll put it out there, and we'll put it out there in the flow of work. And then what we do is deliver focus and insight. So number one, as a leader, regardless of the industry that you're in, I don't need to know everything. And there's different mechanisms already in place for me to learn a bunch of things. Tim, in your world, it's rounding, right? There's leader rounding, there's all these other things that are meant for me to be able to understand the skills, the tools, whatever it is that they need to be able to do their job. We come in on the human side. And the 3 things that you guys can apply in a variety of different ways by leveraging your existing technology or incorporating it into your existing strategy and processes is what we focus on. And we focus on the individual. Are you okay? How do you feel right now? What just happened? Again, and that's where frequency comes in. It's an irrelevant question if I only ask you if you're okay once a year. It doesn't mean anything, because it doesn't reflect what happened 3 months ago or even 2 weeks ago. Are you okay? The next thing that we want to make sure that we give leaders the ability to do is ask, what's most important in the next 5 days? I'm not asking you about a month out, or I'm not asking you necessarily about 2 weeks ago, but as you're stepping into the next sprint, the next week, what is most important? And then combine that with what help do you need? If you're able to deliver that focus and insight, there's a million things happening right now that are really important and sometimes interesting, but here's the things that are going to make a material impact on the way that you feel at work and how effective you are in your job. And I keep hearing from both of you and everybody on this phone, you guys agree with the mentality of a leader is a servant. I'm here to serve you in my leadership capacity. And our jobs as leaders is to be able to ensure that the people under our care are in a position to effectively carry out their duties and responsibilities, and they're doing it in a way that elevates them, it doesn't break them. So as we look at that, I go back to data, obviously, because of where I come from and what I do, but data is incredibly important. So as we go and we look at your organizations, Tim, you alluded a little bit to it when you talked about retention, but what are the insights that you monitor on a regular basis? We had a gentleman that we work very closely with, somebody that I value and respect a lot. His name is Ron Paulus, and he was the CEO of a healthcare system out of North Carolina called Mission Health. And he always talked about it as the health vitals. What are the vitals that you guys are monitoring in your labor force? Which are the ones that you keep a very close eye on to use that to inform your attention, your resources, and make sure that you're doing the very best that you can to support those environments. I'll turn it over to Tim. Give us a little bit more. You alluded to it. You kind of wet our palate with the retention statement. What else do you monitor or go a little bit deeper in terms of how retention is so important?
Sure. So one of the things, again, in healthcare, we're highly evidence-based. So one of the things that we do on a monthly basis across all of our facilities, and at the executive level, this takes time, but we actually do monthly operating reviews where we're looking at patient outcomes, patient satisfaction, quality metrics, a lot of operational metrics. Also, we include in that the employee experience metrics. One of the things that we've worked really hard to do is to link the employee experience to the patient experience. And at this point, what we've done is that we dedicate a 15-minute segment where we actually ask anybody that is on that panel of leaders to share an anecdotal story about what we've done to improve the employee experience, how that's had an impact on a patient experience. Now, this is anecdotal data, and we're logging that anecdotal data. And we've gotten a long list of stories that now create a compelling evidence that the employee experience is directly linked to patient outcomes. It's exciting. We're still in the process of actually trying to codify it in a way that we could actually even put something like that in a white paper. But that may seem a little bit high level, but I have to say that those stories come at the end of our operating, and you know, our senior leaders in our hospitals used to dread, I think, those. Now we come out inspired. It's a different meeting. It's actually changed. You talk about a game changer in terms of how we look at what we do day to day, and how we serve our leaders and how those leaders then serve our patients. It's made a difference, and it's anecdotal data at this point.
Outstanding, outstanding. And I think that's, again, your example is so beneficial to the rest of us because the stakes are so high in the environment that you're in, right? When you say employee experience correlates to the patient experience, we're talking about people's lives and health. So again, the stakes are just really high. And the data supports that. And I think, Dave, you made a comment about how we talk about how surveys are great, but you also have to be careful, right? Just because you get data back from a survey does not mean that data is actionable or it's something that we should take care in. So I'll just briefly share with you guys how did we overcome that? How did Marcus do that? He did it at Gallup, he did it at TNBC when he founded his own company. And maybe you guys can use that type of insight as you guys are leveraging surveys in your environment. So what he did, and back then when TNBC first started out, we had SurveyMonkey and Dave Williams, the founder of that company, as I guess our benefactor. So we had the ability to go out and touch a lot of people and get a lot of insight. And what we did was we went and we deployed hundreds of questions. And these questions were not just any questions. They were focused on the employee experience, but they were designed by PhDs that specialized in writing questions for the purpose of surveys and extracting insight from. So these are all great questions. We deployed them to thousands of teams. So the data validity of that sample is phenomenal. If I ask 4 people, what do you think? That might not necessarily correlate to what 4 other people think. But when you ask thousands of teams, that really makes that data a lot stronger. So we took those hundreds of questions, and then we wanted to correlate the responses to those questions to what we would designate as a high-performing team, mid-performing team, or low-performing team. What does performance mean? It varies by industry. It varies by what you're measuring. You could be measuring retention, productivity, profitability. Maybe you're measuring incidence of accidents, turnover, absenteeism, et cetera. We took all of those metrics and we correlated. And what we would do is we would take those beautifully constructed questions and we would throw them away. If a team that rated high performing or low performing answered it the same way, or there wasn't enough statistical difference to be able to discern which was which. And we kept doing that over and over and over and over again until we landed personally on 8 questions that we believe those 8 questions are going to tell me whether this team is likely to lose somebody in the next 90 days, whether this team is likely to create a phenomenal patient or customer experience in the next 90 days. That's the level of rigor that we applied to our questions. You guys are either doing the very same or you're leveraging other providers to be able to do that. Continue to do that, but just have that mindset in mind. Any question that I send out should be validated and thought through to make sure that what I'm learning and the insight that I'm deriving is giving me signal instead of noise. So what is signal? Signal means that I know which direction it's going and what I need to do. Noise means I just got more data, but I really don't know what to do with that data. It goes back to the other point that was made earlier. Do we want to ask more? Maybe, but let's just make sure that we're very judicious about what we ask and when we ask it, because the nature of the work could get impacted. I know, Dave, we've talked about in your world of IT, we want to be careful, right? We don't want to create sensory overload in terms of all the different things that are touching our employees, because then they'll tune out the really important stuff. So make an internal inventory within your organization around which data points are absolutely crucial, and make sure that those have the air to breathe so that you can collect them, and then start to be super judicious about the data that you discard. For us, if you can imagine that PhD that designed that question that they thought was perfect, they had to discard it because statistically it didn't give me the level of signal that I needed. So that's just one of the broader terms of the story that I wanted to share around what does judiciousness in the data that we take look like. One last example I'll give you guys, and it's a real example and I can say it because he's shared it extensively himself. Chuck Robbins, the CEO of Cisco. He's a business leader. And there's one data point as it relates to people that he always shares with his board. And that's a data point that we designed called the attention metric. And Marcus talked about it in one of our previous calls. And I love the analogy that he used because, I mean, obviously I'm in the topic very closely, but it really resonated with me. And there was, when we look at the attention index, it's like a school teacher is standing in front of a classroom and a student has his hand up and the teacher has his back to them. Like that to me is so dramatic. Imagine in each of your organizations, look at all the phenomenal examples that Dave and that Tim shared with us. Imagine if somebody's raising their hand saying, I need help, I don't feel right, something's not right now, and nobody sees it, nobody's looking for it, nobody's asking for it. Those are the types of things that we want to make sure that we are keeping really close eye on. Dave, again, I respect so much your angle and where you come at it. I'm really curious to hear what are your must-haves from a data standpoint in the world that you measure, either the things you personally measure or in your influence with when you're talking about onboarding or different things. What are the things that you ask your organization to keep a very close eye on as it relates to people?
I'd say I created my own data analytics team because I saw how important it was. And I brought on 3 data scientists. And we really, because we were shifting left and shifting out and doing things and disrupting IT. And so we knew data was king. And so had to start up that team and we started figuring out, okay, how do we monitor the employees, new hires coming in, and what's important to us? Because we want to monitor them for 6 to 8 weeks to make sure that they're having a great experience. And if they're opening all these tickets at the desk, I need to know, because I need to have texts reaching out to them saying, how can I help you? How can I, see that, you're having issues here. So we're really trying to be more proactive, and we're using all that data to say, okay, these are the areas that we need to put more AI and machine learning in place. And these are the areas that we actually need to, focus on. And so we're using all that data to tell us that. And then, one of the things I was going to tell you too, when it came to retention and what Tim was talking about, I will tell you intentionally, when I brought my team in from around the world in April, I tell them, I'm not here to build an empire. That's not what it's about. I'm here to take care of the people that work for this company as a shareholder and, and to have a positive culture. And to do that, we have to understand what every one of our FTEs are looking for in their career goals, especially now with retention, issues that could arise. And so what we did is we talked to every employee and we said, what are your career goals? Where do you want to fit in the organization? Where do you want to be in Mastercard? That's important to us. And whatever that is, we'll make sure you get there, because it's not about keeping you here and making you do IT work. And so we did. We shifted people across different towers and service lines. And I spun up 2 new teams that the employees wanted to be part of, that felt they could make a huge difference. And I was able to move around 14 people. And then we're meeting again in October to look at moving another 15 people outside my organization to different parts of the business and security and HR and other areas, because that's where they want to go. I'd much rather lose them to other parts of the business than outside this company. And so that's some of the things that we're doing too, is to really listen, what do the employees want so that they're happy every day? Because it may not be in our own world that they work in today. And, our job, and you even said it too, we're to be a teacher. I learned that. I was at Converge 22 for Inspire CIO in Atlanta 2 weeks ago. One of the key speakers talked about our job as a leader is to be a teacher. And that's what we're here for. So.
Thank you so much, Dave. And thank you so much, Tim. I look at my watch and I realize our time is up. I'd love to be able to have a couple more hours with you guys. But again, I'm very grateful for this opportunity and grateful for all of the work that you guys do, how you guys step in and really care about these functions. You're not just there to collect a paycheck yourself. You're there to lead and make a difference. And I want to thank Cindy and ESI and everybody that supports this amazing group for the opportunity and the value that you just continuously put out into the world, because I know it does trickle down to nurses and people in all kinds of organizations. So again, thank you, Cindy. And hopefully this was very helpful to you guys. I'm going to leave the link to ADPRI and some of the employee experience work that they do, so you have that at your disposal. Cheers.
Hey, Christian, one thing I want to just wrap it up real quick. If anyone wants a individualized session with Christian, I've already had 2 people that could not be on this call today ask for that. He's more than willing to do it. And I'm going to copy him on our follow-up email. You can reach out directly to him. You can reach out to me. And the other thing I wanted to mention, Tim, there's a couple of questions on your stay interviews that I'm going to ask you to answer, that I'll put the answers in the follow-up email, if that's okay. I think everything else got answered pretty much by Christian, but I wanted to make sure that Erica had asked a question. I want to make sure you guys knew that we needed to answer that. And did anybody have anything else? If not, let us know if you want to have a one-on-one with Christian, because he's more than willing to take you to the next step. Okay. Okay, you guys have a great rest of the day. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Tim. Bye.
Bye-bye.